Welcome to a town hall webinar about COVID-19 and other topics, featuring ASMP General Counsel Tom Madre and ASMP Executive Director Tom Kennedy. Take it away, Mr. Kennedy.
All right, thank you, Doug Pizak. Thank you, Stretch Ledford, and thank you, Jake Campos, for providing the technical support today, as always. I really appreciate that, and welcome everyone to today's town hall. We've got a tremendous amount of material to cover, and I know that all of you have got a lot of questions who have joined us today. I am joined by my General Counsel, Tom Madre, for ASMP, as well as our Copyright Counsel, Mike Clipper. And I thought we could start by addressing the political landscape. As we have come on the air, the president has just signed the latest revised stimulus package, which I believe is CARES 2, if you're counting. And there is aid that is going to flow as a result of the president signing the package this afternoon. But there's an awful lot of complication and things in it that we're going to need to discuss. And I thought we could start earlier in the week. Mike Clipper and I were very involved in crafting letters and sending them out on your behalf, our behalf as a community, to key members of the Senate and House who had oversight responsibilities with regard to the CARES Act. We wanted to make sure that they understood that those of us who represent what we would term micro businesses were really the ones that needed to get assistance out of this second round of stimulus. And I wanted to have Mike speak a little bit directly to where he thinks the political landscape is now, because as we've been going back and forth, one of the things that's incredibly frustrating to me as executive director of the organization is we continue to have organizations like ours left out of having any stimulus being made available to us. So that's a sore point for me personally. But Mike, why don't you talk a little bit about what you've seen in the way of the back and forth this week politically, just so those tuning in today have a sense of that.
A week ago, we were talking, and the parties, the Republicans and Dems, the leadership were sort of at the diverse ends of the spectrum. The Republicans wanted to add money to the stimulus package, and the Democrats also wanted to add categories for state and local governments, which did not make it in, as I recall, Tom.
That's correct.
And hospitals, et cetera, other categories. I indicated that I thought that they would work that through because of the enormity of the problem, and they did, and the new bill was signed, as Tom mentioned, just a couple of hours ago. The question is that the type of issues that Tom talked about and we were reaching out to the Hill about still have not been, in our view, adequately addressed, if at all, regarding such things as two key issues, I guess. One is what Tom mentioned, the micro issue, and that is we would like to see money designated specifically for businesses of a small number, perhaps 10 or less, or maybe even with a gross revenue amount built in as well. So even though we've gotten through a new stimulus bill, there is still questions, given all the press you've heard about people who got it who perhaps shouldn't have got money under the earlier CARES Act. The problem we have now is that there's a lot more to be done and a lot more specific to us. The difficulty we're facing, one of the potential difficulties, is that Majority Leader McConnell has indicated, probably under pressure from his conservative members, that he's not sure that there is going to be another package because the amount of debt that's being incurred under these new bills, the new laws, I should say. So one of the things we have to do is to keep pushing to make sure that Congress understands the job is not done, and that we need to echo what we've been saying all week to folks in the last week since we spoke to you, that there need to be specific provisions that go to the problem of the really micro business. So that's really the big issue. The other issue, which Tom Madre is going to spend a lot of time on, dealing with state unemployment. As some of you may know, last week, Governor Cuomo announced that he was changing the procedure for, under the state unemployment, so that in order to qualify for the federal unemployment, which Mr. Madry will get into, they were going to streamline that process. And we're also hopeful that either Congress can provide to that in future legislation, so that you don't, as currently, as Mr. Madry, as I understand it, currently you have to exhaust your state unemployment, get rejected before you can apply for the federal,
Yeah.
employment.
And we're going to discuss that. In many states,
Right.
that is the rule, and with a few notable exceptions. So
right. So what we're saying is it would be really good to echo as many states as we can, the type of procedure where you go directly from applying to the state, and immediately, if they indicate that you would not qualify, due to characteristics or factors, that you immediately get sent into the federal system for unemployment. But the bottom line is that right now, I think people on the Hill are stepping back. They went out today. They won't be back. They'll be back in 10 days, on the 4th, I guess. And that's a good time for us over the next week to get a very detailed message that we've been sending, reiterated to the members, regarding particularly the need to specify sums of money for the really small person, so the money does filter down. Tom's also going to discuss another issue, and that is the fact that the new guidances that have come out from Treasury in an effort to respond to the backlash that came out when it was learned that so many publicly traded companies and very large ones were recipients of federal monies, which helped dry up the monies. I think that's it. So we have a lot of work to do, and we have to keep the pressure on them. And the fact they'll be home next week, although many of them have been home, I think it's a good time to, everybody to keep writing, and we will be reaching out to you. It's not going to be just Tom writing letters. It should be the masses writing letters. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom Madry. And unless Tom Kennedy, you want to add anything? That's
just simply, I think the last point you made, Mike, is really pretty critical. I think members of Congress have become accustomed to hearing from Mike and I on various issues that we regularly deal with, including the CASE Act, which we're continuing to push, and we can talk about that later today. But it really is essential that we have support from our membership and those who might not be members but are part of the photographic community that we've invited into these town halls and Wednesday webinars, that all of you are making your voices heard on Capitol Hill. We've got systems in place that allow it to be very easy for you. You can send in letters probably in less than 5 minutes. And, I want to encourage all of you to please support us by making your voices heard and your concerns noted. Because it's without that, we really don't have a chance of getting accomplished some of the things that, we seek to accomplish on a regular basis. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom to get started.
all right, well, welcome everyone. If you've been to these town halls before, we're thrilled to have you back. If this is your first time, we're very happy to have you here. This is our 6th town hall that we've done. And each week we've been able to answer more questions and add some more clarification. And I always start with figuring out exactly what has changed since the last time we spoke. And so that's where we're going to start today. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get rolling. All right, can everyone see that? Thumbs up from Tom Kennedy or someone. We look good. All right, perfect. So.
Oh, sorry, I lied, Tom. Not seeing it.
We can't see it.
Yeah.
No? Okay, let's try this again.
I see it.
Okay, let's try it again. All
Okay.
right.
It's up. It's me.
Are we good now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to assume that we are. I heard from you, Doug, and so I trust that we are up and going. Okay, so today we're going to talk about CARES Act update, unemployment. And I think the last 5 weeks, we've been getting more and more questions about unemployment. And you have heard me doing my best impression of a lawyer and sidestepping those questions because there's a lot that was unclear on it. Today, I'm just going to get into it. I'm going to give you the information we know. I'm going to tell you what is still up in the air, and I'm going to give you as much guidance as I can on how to approach all of this. I'm already seeing in the Q&A box that people are asking, well, how do these programs work together? PPP and EIDL and state unemployment and everything else. I'm going to touch on that today. In fact, I'm going to spend a minute on the singular question, should I take PPP money or should I apply for the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program through the state? And can I do both and that kind of stuff? So we're going to talk about that specifically. As always, I'm going to start with a disclaimer, and I'm going to say that if you haven't seen this occur already, things are changing every single day right now. I went and was up until 2 a.m. working on revising posts at the ASMP site. And I said, well, the president hasn't signed the new bill yet, but we expect him to do so very soon. And then today he signs the bill. And so now we have to go back and change some of those things. Everything is changing so quickly. Be sure, not only at ASMP, but everywhere you're looking online, look at the dates. If something was written 3 weeks ago, really double check that it's still up to date. It's likely not. In the questions, I'm going to do my very best to give you answers that are helpful. At the same time, we can't answer the very, very specific questions. You really want to seek advice and counsel from attorneys you work with, or accountants, CPAs, bookkeepers. Your advisors in your local place are going to be the best. I'm here in Texas, and so I know a little bit more about the Texas unemployment system than I do some of the other unemployment systems. My staff worked tirelessly to put together the information you're going to see today, but none of us live in all these other states. And so you want to double check what we're talking about. We really think it's the best info that's out there, but you want to check and double check. All right, let's get into it. So what's changed in the last week? Well, on April 21st, the Senate passes the bill that increases the funding and gives more funding to the PPP, the EIDL, and other programs. And we're going to talk about that. 2 days later, April 23rd, yesterday, the House passes a bill funding the PPP, EIDL, and other programs. On that same day, yesterday, Treasury issued a new version of their frequently asked questions page, and we're going to look at what that included. And then just today, the president signed the bill into law. As of 1:45, which is the last time I looked at this, SBA.gov is still not accepting new applications for the EIDL program. If you go to the SBA site, it says lapse in appropriations, and it doesn't give you a link to click to sign up for the EIDL. Based on talking to people who seem to be somewhat knowledgeable at this, we expect the SBA.gov website to be accepting applications soon. Does that mean tonight? Does that mean tomorrow, Sunday, Monday? I don't know, but soon. And so I really want you checking back. Now, because the Paycheck Protection Program is based so much on your bank or your lender, I don't know if some banks currently have applications up or not. They may not. I know some banks definitely do not. And you are getting a cameo from my Great Dane. That's Rothko behind me. He's going to settle down in a minute. So if you see him, that's who that is. There was more money in this bill that the president signed today. How much more money? Well, let's look at the specifics. $484 billion total. Of that amount, $321 billion went to the Paycheck Protection Program. That's really helpful. That PPP is a good program. It has been rolled out in a terrible way, and it has gone to people who don't need the money. But the program, I believe, is a good program. $60 billion has been allocated for the economic injury disaster relief type loans. That's those EIDL loans you hear me talk about, and those you get through the SBA at sba.gov. $75 billion went to hospitals, and $25 billion goes to testing. This money will run out. The first round of money, about $350 billion or so, took 13 days to run out. When it ran out, there were thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of applications, no one really knows, still in the queue at the SBA and at your lenders. When these places get money, they're going to start with the applications that are already in. Do not wait anymore. Once these applications open up, do not wait to apply. Please apply, because this money will run out. I read somewhere from someone that I tend to trust that this could be a 2 or 3 day thing. This could be a 72-hour thing and there's no more money. We don't really know. It could be 2 weeks, but I doubt it would be longer than the first go round, because what you have to imagine is that it's about the same amount of money for the PPP, except now there's so many applications already lined up in the queue. Now, let me say this. Please apply. I don't know if you're getting that I want you to apply. It's really, really important. This week was the first week that money started flowing from these programs in any substantial way. I heard from many members and many of my clients throughout the small business world that money started coming in from the EIDL advances. And remember, last week we talked about the EIDL advances are being calculated as $1,000 per employee that you had on January 31, 2020. And to answer a question I've been getting, and it's a great question, and I want to make sure we're super clear here, you count as your own employee for that calculation. Even if you're a sole proprietor, even if you're self-employed, even if you're an independent contractor, you count as one employee. So if you put 0 on the sheet, that's okay. I've spoken directly to the SBA and asked them this question. If you filled out an application and you said, I have 0 employees, you will still be counted as one employee. They're treating applications with 0 the same as they are with 1. Don't reapply, you'll be counted. Okay. Money started coming in, and it didn't come in for everyone, and it will be rolling out as more money is allocated. But last week, this time, I told you I've tried to be very transparent about my business, and I hadn't heard one word from the Small Business Administration in close to, I think, 16 days. And then on Sunday night, I got an email that said the Small Business Administration has pulled my credit report. I still hadn't received an email. 48 hours later, I woke up and there was money in my account according to the calculation that I just said, $1,000 per employee as of January 31. No email has ever come from the SBA. So if you're sitting there and you're thinking, I didn't get any emails, they must have lost my thing, they're not going to get to it, they're just not going to contact you, is what seems to be the case right now. That money has started coming in. Now, a much smaller amount of money has started coming in from people who applied for the Paycheck Protection Program. Not an insignificant number of small businesses, not a significant number of small businesses, but still a few. That is something that we expect to open up here in the next week to 2 weeks in terms of money going. But you will not get any of this money if you do not apply. Please apply. I don't want to come here 1 week from now and tell you that money is out again, and then we're stuck. Because as Mike and Tom were saying, we don't know that there's going to be another round of funding for these programs. We were pretty confident last week that this was going to happen, that there was going to be more money allocated. I felt pretty solid that this would happen, but we don't know that it's going to happen again. So please apply. Okay. But today, I don't want to talk about the Paycheck Protection Program and EIDL too much more. What I do want to talk about is state unemployment, because we have gotten a lot of questions about this. And I have not given straight answers because there haven't been straight answers to give. What we did today is try to put together the best information we have and with as many states as we thought was reasonable, because I just don't know all the info for all 50 states. But what I am going to give you is a roadmap for, in your state, how to get the information you need. Let's start here. The CARES Act includes 3 unemployment-specific policies and programs. The first is called Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, PUA. The second is called Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, FPUC. The third is called Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation. Boy, that sounds a lot like the last one, but whatever, PEUC. Okay, those are the 3. And you may have only heard about one, which is PUA. The other 2 are kind of ancillary programs, and we're going to go into what they are. Each of these serves a separate function. But a few basics that I really want to, hammer on with the CARES Act is that the CARES Act establishes that states must offer a minimum benefit, or the CARES Act is the minimum benefit for the CARES Act is 50% of the state's average weekly UI benefit, unemployment insurance benefit. The average in all 50 states is $387 for a week for unemployment assistance. The minimum in this country is $194. So there are some states where you get $194 a week. What the CARES Act says is that the minimum benefit has to be at least 50% of whatever your state's average weekly UI benefit is. The CARES Act also removes a 7-day waiting period. Many states said you have to wait at least 7 days from the time you apply before benefits can start. I'm going to tell you here in a second that this looked really good on paper, but almost no one is getting unemployment assistance right now. And it's not because of some 7-day waiting period. It's because they haven't figured it out in the last 6 weeks how to get it done. Okay. If you thought that the PPP rollout was bad, wait until we talk about what's happening with the states. Important though, benefits are retroactive. Benefits are retroactive, which means it is really tough if they take another month to give you unemployment benefits, but when they do, it will be backdated to when you lost your job. This also includes the FPUC amounts, which are that $600 amount that we talked about. So I know it's frustrating and it's heartbreaking and it's ridiculous that states haven't been able to get on the ball here. At the same time, when they do finally get on the ball, you're not losing out on money. It will all be given to you in a lump sum at the first distribution. That's the way most states do it. Now, a minute ago, I said the states have really messed this up, rolling it out, but let me be a little more clear. You have probably seen these graphs that show that in the last 4 weeks, unemployment claims are higher than at any time in the history of the country. And in the last 4 weeks, we've eclipsed the yearly average for all the major years of the worst years the country's ever had. This is putting an incredible strain on these systems, an incredible strain on these systems. And it's only now that the states are starting to figure out how to do this. Okay. The bottom line though, and you've heard me say this a million times, this is a state issue. You cannot call the federal government and ask them about the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program or the $600 a week program or the PEUC program. They will tell you, go to your state. Let's talk about what these programs actually are. The first one, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, PUA. This is the big one that I think matters for most of ASMP members, photographers, self-employed, sole proprietors. At the beginning of each of these, I put a note where you can find more information. There's going to be a lot of links today. And I have sent over a PDF and copies of slides to some of our wonderful people who put this together, and hopefully we'll get everything up there in a place you can download these and go to these links. For the details, search this. UIPL number 11-20 and UIPL number 16-20. That's going to give you the details on the PUA. Here's the overview. It offers 39 weeks of unemployment benefits. Those are available through December 31st of 2020. Additionally, you can get $600 per week that's paid by the federal government through the states on top of your state benefits through July 31, 2020. But let's say your state doesn't get around to making this happen until early June, and that $600 ends July 31. Remember, benefits are retroactive. The other thing the PUA includes is regulations talking about another program that I'm really not going to get into, which is the Disaster Unemployment Assistance Program, the DUA. It will come up one more time, that's why I mentioned it. The weekly benefit amount has to be equal to the amount under state law, subject to the minimum DUA benefit, and then there's that $600 on top of it. But think about what we're saying is that the state gets to use its policies and determine what your benefits are, and then on top of it sits the PUA. You don't, in many states, apply for these things together. Mike Clipper brought up a great point that New York has done something wonderful in the last week, where they said, hey, what we were making you do was applying first to our regular unemployment, then we were denying you, and then you were eligible to apply for the PUA. Now you can do that all at one time in one application. I really hope most states are going to move to that process. In many states, you have to apply first, and then you have to get rejected if you're a sole proprietor or self-employed, and then you have to file for the PUA. That's a ridiculous way to do things. The reason they're doing that is their legacy systems and computer systems are not set up to do these things together. Okay. But who's eligible for the PUA? Well, the people who are eligible are those who are not eligible to receive regular unemployment compensation benefits. So the PUA only applies to people who are not able to receive regular unemployment benefits. That's another reason the states want you to apply through them first before you apply for this program. Because what they're saying is, if you can get regular unemployment with the states, well then we're not going to give you PUA, which is a program that the CARES Act designated for people who were not covered. This program applies to people who are unemployed, partially employed, or unable to work because of COVID-19. If you can get regular unemployment benefits, you're not eligible for PUA. If you can telework, or if you have paid leave, you are not eligible for PUA. There are some jobs that have not really changed too much. They have just gone from an office setting to a home setting, and they're sitting behind the same type of computer and talking on the same webcam, and their business has not been affected. If that is the case, you're not eligible for unemployment because you still have your full-time job. This program, the PUA, is the one that most sole proprietors, self-employed, independent contractors will fall under. The next thing I want to talk about is the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation Program. And you can, again, search UIPL number 15-20 if you want to read 40 to 50 pages of mind-numbing stuff. This offers the $600 a week we've been talking about. But it offers that to those who are eligible for regular state UI benefits. Because this $600 isn't just for those in the PUA, it's being offered to people who are eligible under their state program. Now, confusingly, and trust me, I am confused by it, this is the program that's funding the $600 that's part of the PUA and the PEUC and the STC and the DUA. But all those other programs will talk about the $600 and they won't reference this. It is a separate program, but really what this is is the additional benefit part of the CARES Act. That $600, this is where it's all coming from. One thing to keep in mind, if you quit without good cause, then you're not eligible to take part in these programs. What does good cause mean? Well, I didn't get into that on this slide because that's more something that is detailed and something I need to write an article about. But the underlying idea is that if you are just uncomfortable with the idea of working and COVID-19 has not rendered your job, has not affected your job, but you don't want to do your job for one reason or another, and you end up quitting, for a reason that wouldn't be considered good cause, then you can't take part in these programs. You won't get that extra $600. That is going to apply to very few of the people watching this, but I want to include it for completeness. The third program we talked about, and there's a reason we do this at the beginning, so that, if I did this at the end, everyone would fall asleep. The Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation Program. You, again, can search UIPL number 17-20 for more information. This program does something different than the first two. It extends unemployment benefits by 13 weeks. Most states offer unemployment for a 26-week period, a maximum of a 26-week period. But what this program does is it says, hey, states, I know you normally say 26, but add on an additional 13 so that it takes us through the end of December 31, 2020. And again, here, if you read this part of the law, it says it provides $600 a week through July 31st, 2020. That's the same thing we've been talking about. It comes from the money in the last slide. But the whole idea is that you get unemployment benefits from your state up through December 31, 2020. You get that extra $600 a week only through July 31, 2020. One other thing this program does is it says, hey, states, you have to be flexible. And that's the word that's used in the law, which is a terrible word if you want to have someone do something. States, you have to be flexible with requiring people that they actively seek work. This part of the law says, look, there's a pandemic going on. We don't want people out there hitting the pavement trying to get a job when we're trying to social distance and everything else. So some states have rules that say you must be actively searching for work and you have to prove that. What this part of the law says is, hey, states, I need you to back off on that a little bit, right? There's a lot of stuff going on. We need to back off on that. This applies to those who have exhausted all the rights to regular compensation under state or federal law and are ineligible for PUA. Okay. Remember, PUA said the people who are eligible for that are the ones that are not eligible for state benefits. Okay. And then this comes in and says, if you're ineligible for PUA, then this one would apply to you. Look, bottom line, if you fit under other UC benefits, this isn't a program that you're ever going to really care about. The 13-week thing applies to all the states, I think, at this point. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. The states have to sign on with the government to agree to this 13-week extension. The majority of them already have. Some of them haven't, but they're in the process of. Okay, all right. So let's put it all together. First, check with your state. I mean, look, you have to go to your state's unemployment website. I like to think of myself as able to answer most legal questions. I don't know every state. And today, I know you guys are going to ask me questions, and I'm going to tell you to go to your state. I'm going to sound like a broken record, and it's not because I'm trying to be difficult. First, go to your state office. If you're self-employed, a sole proprietor, or otherwise not eligible for regular state benefits, then the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program is probably the one that you're going to end up getting benefits under. But guess what? States are terrible at this so far. They're overwhelmed. They don't have the infrastructure. No one's paid attention to this. And when you go from having, 20,000 people file for unemployment, a month ago to 1 million people this month, stuff is going to break. They're not doing a good job at working through this, but they're getting there. Earlier, I said, I think this week and the following week are going to be the 2 weeks that really make the most difference getting money from the EIDL and the PPP. I also think that applies to unemployment. The unemployment money is going to start flowing in the next 2 weeks. I feel confident about that. The additional $600 a month is funded by that FPUC, and you do not have to apply for that separately, okay? That is part of these various programs. Remember, you don't have to make a separate application to the FPUC if you've already made an application to the PUA. Okay? That rolls into the other programs. Here's an important question, and one that's often overlooked. What if there weren't a pandemic and I fire someone in my office, then they apply for unemployment. My unemployment taxes go up next year because my business has been charged with the fact that the employee now has filed unemployment. Does that happen here? If you have to let people go, or if you file for unemployment because you're a sole proprietor, does that mean next year that your business is going to have to pay more in taxes to unemployment office? I don't know. This is a question that could really impact the group that's watching this, the self-employed, the micro businesses, as Mike mentioned. We have to figure out what's going to happen there. I think different states are going to treat it different ways. We'll see. Okay, should I choose the Paycheck Protection Program money, or should I go to the unemployment office and get the PUA money? I cannot answer this for you, but I will tell you how to figure this out. First, figure out the maximum amount of your PPP. Remember, I'm going to just take a sole proprietor here, okay? If you're a sole proprietor, you look at line 31 of your Schedule C. That shows you your net income for 2019. You divide that by 12, and you multiply that number by 2.5. So, I am bad at math, but I'm just going to think it through in my head here. Let's say that you have, actually, I'm not going to do the math because I want you to think I know what I'm talking about. The idea is that you need to calculate your maximum PPP. There are articles at ASMP, there are articles at my website that talk about this. Some of them you will find right at the top if I've updated it lately or not, because I really want to be clear that we need to figure this out. What you need to do is remember line 31 of your Schedule C if you're a sole proprietor, or if you're a single member LLC taxed as a sole proprietor, or if you are self-employed in some other way, right? That's your net income for the year. That divided by 12 times 2.5 is mainly going to be your number. If you've already gotten an EIDL loan, that goes into that calculation as well. But why don't you do this? Why don't you go to the ASMP website, and you're going to see a brand new article that went up an hour or two ago, and it's called, I think, Major Changes to PPP and EIDL, parentheses, updated for 24/20. I go through the calculations right there. Go read that article. Okay, so you figured out how much you're going to get from PPP. If you get PPP, not a given, but you got to get that application in, okay? Second, you want to try to figure out the amount of your unemployment benefits. Now, there's a wonderful website, and I'm going to see if I can actually click on it and share my screen here. And we'll say allow, and then I'm going to stop sharing here. And I know I'm going on a little more than usual today, but we've had so many questions on this, I think it's worth doing. And I hope you guys think it's worth doing as well. And if not, I'm sorry. This is the link I just sent you. This is significant provisions of state unemployment insurance laws effective January 2019, which I think is the most recent one. So it gives you your state, and then it talks about how things are computed. So in Alabama, the weekly benefit amount minimum is $45, maximum is $265. If you earn weekly earnings, then this is disregarded, and here's how you calculate this, and all that kind of stuff. This is actually a pretty useful sheet, even if it looks intimidating at first. Goes through every state on there, looking good. Okay. I put that link into the mix here, so you can click on that in the PDF. I am not going to click on every link today because we're about to see a lot of them. So the minimum benefit, remember I said the minimum benefit for under the CARES Act has to be $194 a week, which you'll get for 39 weeks, plus $600 a week, which you'll get for 16 weeks. You figure out a number there. 194 times 39 weeks plus $600 times 16 weeks gives you a number. Well, you have one more step, and then you get to decide. Unemployment is considered taxable income. You will have to pay taxes on your unemployment income, on your unemployment benefits. You do not have to pay taxes on your PPP benefits if you get a loan. Many states will take money out of your unemployment benefits before they give them to you. They'll like take out a flat 10% or 4% or something. And so you don't pay taxes after the fact, but you do need to lower the amount of benefits you think you're getting by however your state does taxes. And then you can compare the numbers. If your PPP, which by the way, only lasts 8 weeks, right? Remember, PPP lasts 8 weeks from the day you get it. That's the forgivable loan portion. If you want PPP forgiven, you have to spend that money in that 8 weeks, and you have to do it in the ways we've talked about ad nauseum, right? You have to take that number and compare it to what your possible unemployment number will be based on everything that's on this slide, and then you decide. I can't make the decision for you. If you think your business can really, you just have to keep it afloat for 2 months and then things are going to go well, maybe you go with PPP. If you think that you're just going to get a lot more money out of the PUA program, maybe you go that way. Can you do both? For sole proprietors, by the way, there's not an answer to that question. I'm going to give you now my opinion, which is similar to my opinion 3 weeks ago and different than my opinion 2 weeks ago. For sole proprietors, I do not believe that you can do both, because in the most recent guidance that came out from Treasury that said, and I talked about this last week, there was a line in there, and that line said, note, if you apply for the PPP, that may affect what you get from your state uninsurance benefits. It did not tell you how it would affect it. It only told you that it may affect it, which means nothing. And I don't know what it means, but for sole proprietors, if you are the only one that you're paying with the PPP money, it's going to be a hard sell to the unemployment office to tell them that for the 8 weeks, you are unemployed. But here's a thing I've never said before, and I now believe it to be true. That PPP money runs out in 8 weeks. Can you go then file for unemployment? I absolutely believe so. Absolutely believe so. That is something that I've spoken to a number of people about. Again, I may come back next week and tell you something different because the Treasury's put out guidance on something different. The bottom line about will something mesh with unemployment is your state. The state's going to be the one to decide. The federal government said, look, I'm just not going to give you an answer on that. All right. Here we go. Maybe. Let's see. I am about to give you information for the 10 most populous states. I am not doing it for all 50 states. I'm doing it for 10. And here's the information I'm going to give you. I asked 4 questions. And by the way, quick shout out. I asked these questions to my staff via Slack at 12:01 a.m. last night. And they compiled everything by the time I was done with my last webinar at 12:45 p.m. today. And then we put it all in here for you. And so they're working hard and I'm very proud of them. They did a good job. Okay. Here are the questions I asked. What is the name of the department and the web address of the state unemployment agency? Does the state generally, before the pandemic, accept self-employed and sole proprietors into their unemployment program? Has the state started accepting the PUA applications? And what is the maximum duration of unemployment benefits through the state? So for the 10 most populous states, I'm about to tell you. Let's look at it. In California, it's called the Employment Development Department, and there's the web address. California generally does accept sole proprietors into their unemployment system, even before the pandemic. California is ready to take PUA applications starting on 4/28. I think that's Monday, 24, Tuesday of next week. How long? What's the duration? 26 weeks is what the state does. And then remember the PUA puts on an extra 13. 26 plus 13 is 39. I didn't write that here, but it's 39, which takes us through December 31, 2020, which is when everything ends. Here are a few quotes from the state. Due to the impact of COVID-19, we made the following temporary exceptions for all unemployment insurance claims until further notice. 1, the 7-day waiting period is waived for claims after January 19th. 2, you are not required to look for work each week. That's California. Texas. Texas, unbelievably to me, and I didn't realize it until I started looking at it, is on their game here, okay? Texas is doing well. The Texas Workforce Commission is who you go to. Texas does not generally accept sole proprietors into their program, but remember, the PUA program specifically includes sole proprietors, and so I'm giving you that piece of info because sometimes if you have to apply to your state first and they don't accept sole proprietors, then they're going to reject you, and then you have to apply for PUA, okay? Is Texas currently taking PUA applications? Yes, they are. There's the link. Texas is 26 weeks plus a 13-week extension. 2 things about this. 1, Texas says if you have already applied for unemployment benefits, do not apply again. They will determine which pandemic unemployment benefits program you are eligible for and notify you by mail or electronic correspondence. Make sure to request the benefit payment on the filing instructions we provided when you apply, and every 2 weeks after that on your filing day. What this is saying is they don't want you to apply again, even if you applied before these programs came out, okay? Listen to them. They also made actually a really nice flow chart. Some states have done this. I put in Texas's because it was pretty clear. On the left, already applied for UI benefits, then you're eligible to receive UI or PUA for 39 weeks. If you're eligible for regular UI benefits, you apply online and you're eligible to receive those. If you're a non-traditional applicant, what does that mean? Self-employed, independent contractor, sole proprietor. Then you're a new applicant, you apply online. If you've already applied, you wait, and then they determine if you're eligible for PUA. And if you've exhausted your unemployment, which means that you were unemployed maybe before all this happened, on or after July of 19, wait for notification. But remember, one of those programs I mentioned it extends for people who have had exhausted benefits. Florida Department of Economic Opportunity. They do not generally accept sole proprietors. They are not currently taking PUA specific applications. I don't like Florida right now, okay? The reason is that Florida says, hey, we're all set up, and they put out press releases saying, you know, we have the infrastructure to do this, but every single member I've talked to in Florida has not had a good experience, and we've heard from a few of them, has not had a good experience there. My staff could not find a place to apply for the PUA when we went this morning. How long do benefits last in Florida? 12 weeks plus a 13-week extension via PUA. Changes to Florida unemployment. Benefits are now available to self-employed. I'm not going to read everything about everything for each state. That's the basics. New York. New York started real rocky, but they're doing all right. New York Department of Labor, that's where you go. New York generally does not accept sole proprietors. Can you apply for PUA today? Yes, you can apply today. Visit unemployment.labor.newyork.gov, which, as Mike Clipper said, you now apply on one application for regular unemployment and PUA. And I hope every state starts doing that. New York right now is one of the only ones that I know is doing it. I'm sure there are others. I put a lot of links in there because New York has really good graphics. They do 26 weeks plus a 13-week extension. Pennsylvania, there's where it is. Generally does not accept sole proprietors. It is ready to take PUA applications right now. 26 weeks plus 13 for PUA. And then there are a few things there. Important here, our PUA system has been corrected. For individuals who believe they inaccurately received the PUA ineligibility message, try it again. Texas said, don't try it again. Pennsylvania says, do try it again. This is why I can't answer everyone when you ask me questions about what does my state want me to do. I have no idea. Go to your state's website and find information like this. Everything we found is publicly accessible and right there on the website. Illinois Department of Employment Security generally does not accept sole proprietors. They're currently taking PUA applications. It's 26 weeks plus 13 weeks. And by the way, when I say they're currently taking, what I mean by that is they are set up to accept them. You may still have to apply through the regular program and then get denied and then apply through PUA. But some states are not even ready to accept PUA applications. So when I say they're ready, what I mean is you can't maybe just go apply for that, but you have to apply regularly and then apply, but they're set up to do it. Ohio generally does not accept SPs. They are taking PUA applications starting today. They're not going to begin processing those claims until May. 26 plus 13, and then it talks about what they're doing. Georgia Department of Labor generally does not accept sole proprietors. They're accepting PUA applications as of last Wednesday. Now, Georgia normally only gives you 14 to 20 weeks, but up to 26 weeks. It's normally 14 to 20, up to 26. They have not fully agreed to this whole 13-week extension thing, but everything we can tell says they're on their way to doing so. Okay, North Carolina, we're almost done. Two more. North Carolina Department of Commerce generally does not accept sole proprietors, is ready to take PUA applications starting today. You live in North Carolina and you've decided this is the way to go ahead and start getting going on that. They offer up to 20 weeks plus 13 weeks. And they said, alert, independent contractors and self-employed workers can apply for pandemic unemployment assistance beginning Friday the 24th. That is today. And finally, Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity generally does not accept them. They are ready to take PUA applications. It's up to 20 weeks plus a 13-week extension. All right. I am going to stop there for the purposes of what we're talking about. Let me stop sharing my screen real quick. I hope that what I just went through answered a lot of questions that are in the question box, and I'm sure it raised a million more questions. If I did not get to your state, and I had no real way to do it except to pick the 10 largest states, I want you to go back to where I asked the 4 questions. 1, right? Where do you go? So just Google unemployment and then my state. 2, do they normally accept sole proprietors and independent contractors? Out of the 10 most populous states, California is the only one that did before the pandemic. The reason I keep bringing that up is there's a different application process if your state does or doesn't, right? If they do, then you're eligible for state benefits, which changes the different programs you're under. Because remember, PUA said you have to be ineligible for certain things. And so it just might be a different name to something. So just bear with that. The third question is, are they accepting and set up for PUA applications? And then I think the fourth question was, what's the maximum term of benefits? If you live in Florida, even with the 13-week extension, you get fewer benefits for a shorter period of time than in many of those other states. And some other states were like that too. I'm done for the moment. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Tom. And I hope that was helpful. You're going to see some more articles coming out about that, but I wanted to get this information out to y'all first before we go and start writing.
First, Tom, I want to thank you and your staff for incredible work getting this part of the presentation ready today. I know how much pressure you've been under, as we both have, for the questions, and Mike for all the information and the work that we've been trying to do to support the entire community, and did a great job with this, so thanks for that. So let's start with our questions. We have some that came in overnight from people who pre-registered, and I'll start with those, and then we'll go to the live ones for today. From Stan Katie, I have just received my SBA loan via Wells Fargo. Let me move my box out of the way. What can I do to make sure this loan is forgivable?
Great question. So a few things about, so when you say the SBA loan from Wells Fargo, I'm going to assume what you're talking about is the Paycheck Protection Program loan. And that is a loan that is forgivable if you use it for the right reasons or the right purposes. The first thing that you can use it for, and you have to use it for, is 75% of that money has to be spent on paying your employees. If you're a sole proprietor, it has to be spent on paying yourself. That sounds silly, but that's how it works. You have to pay yourself. You can't just start using business money to pay personal rent without it going to your personal account first. You can also use that money to pay business rent, interest on mortgage that's related to your business, and a few other things, including interest on prior debt obligations and some other things. The clock on the 8-week counter starts the day the money hits your account. The forgiveness period is that 8 weeks. What you do with that money in that 8 weeks is going to determine if it's forgiven, okay? So you want to make sure you're using it for those purposes, and you're using it within those 8 weeks, so that at the end of the 8 weeks, your bank is going to have a method of having you prove you used it for the right purposes. Last week, I talked about some of the best practices for this, but I hadn't really gotten a lot of info. Right now, what I will tell you is that if you have an extra bank account, and by extra, I mean you have a savings account you don't really use or something else, you might want to segment this money over there and then transfer it to your business account when you need it, and then pay out of your business account. The way that you're going to have this money forgiven is to be able to show a paper trail of where the money went and where it came from. That's going to be the key. Use it for the right purposes, use it in the 8 weeks, and keep good records, and then that's going to be the key.
I think this is answering some of the questions that are in the queue, but let me say a number of people have asked what to do if they applied for EIDL, they got a generic form letter back, but no clear instructions about, furthering the application process. Similarly, several people have said that they had sent in their PPP applications and have not heard back from a lender, and is there anything that they should be doing at this point? So I think that's kind of boiling down the questions.
Yeah, that's great. So what I would say is this: on the EIDL, which is the application you do through SBA.gov, at the end of that application, you should have gotten in the next day or so an email from them that had a confirmation number that your application was submitted. If you have that email, it is likely the next time you're going to hear anything from anyone about that is when money goes into your bank account. Now, I will tell you, it seems universal. It's not necessarily going to remain the same. 48 hours before the money's deposited, the US government and the Small Business Administration are pulling your credit report, and they're pulling it through Experian. I've only seen Experian be used. If you follow your credit monitoring and you see that someone pulled your credit report from Experian, it's likely that, and you're likely going to get that advance money soon. Okay. Remember, this is an advance on an EIDL loan. We haven't even gotten to the idea of actually getting those loans. I'm only worried about the advances. So if you got the application confirmation, you're done. Don't worry about it. The next thing you will probably see is your money in the account. Now, great question. Someone asked me, hey, they're pulling my credit. I thought this is going to be something that applies to everyone. This is only information that I've gotten from 2 sources, and it hasn't been made official. But what I'm hearing is that if your credit score is above 425, you're not going to have any trouble here. If it's below 425, what that probably means is you're currently involved in some kind of bankruptcy or something. And if that's the case, then you would be ineligible for some of these things anyway. So it is trying to include as many people as possible. I have yet to hear of someone, and I'm sure it's happened, but I've yet to hear someone directly who's talked to me and said that they didn't get an EIDL loan because of a credit reason. As far as the PPP, you got to imagine that when that loan comes in, that all happens through your bank. For a long time, my bank didn't tell me anything, and then just after they told the world that they were out of money, the bank sent me an email and said, "Hey, we processed your application. We're waiting to send it to the SBA as soon as applications open up again." I think a lot of people got that email this week, that their application is just in line for when these programs open up again. Which brings me back to my point I was hitting so much earlier. Get in line on these things. Please, please, please apply.
So this is from Archie Carpenter, and this is sort of, I think you've addressed this sort of, Tom, already, but let me just re-ask it again. If a person, he applied for a PPP loan yesterday from the bank, should I not file for the Pennsylvania's unemployment PUA since the application is pending?
Yes. So if you applied after the money ran out, essentially what that means is you've given the info to your bank, but the bank has not given the info to the SBA, and you have not been approved by the government for this. You likely will be approved, but you might not be approved depending on where you are in line. You might not be approved until this money runs out again, which could take 3 or 4 days. It could take 1 or 2 weeks. I would be shocked if this money were still around in 15 days. That would blow my mind. So the PPP is not guaranteed until it says you've been approved and money's been allocated. Okay. If your application is pending, by all means, file for unemployment. I talked with someone at the Texas Workforce Commission, and essentially I was told, look, the PPP is not a done deal. File unemployment, and if the PPP money comes in, tell the unemployment office, and they'll have a procedure for that. But do not wait on that, because that is speculative. It may be possible, I don't know, it may be possible that there are so many applications already in line that the money will run out before any new applications even get funded. I don't think that's true, but it could be. So file for unemployment if you need it.
Okay, here's a related question. Can you take unemployment, then stop for the PPP for the 8-week period, and then restart unemployment after that PPP period is elapsed?
I believe most states will allow you to do that. You got to imagine, remember, let's take a time that's not a pandemic. You lose your job, you go get unemployment, but then you're able to get another job. That doesn't mean necessarily that that just means you put a pause on your unemployment benefits until the other job lets you go, or seasonal, or fires you, or whatever. That's analogous to that situation you described, where the PPP is allowing you to pay yourself for 8 weeks, and then maybe at the end of it, you can't pay yourself anymore. In that case, you've already filled out all your unemployment paperwork, and you probably can restart. And you hear me saying words like probably and likely and generally. That's because the person who's going to decide that is your state. That's who is going to make that ultimate decision. There's nothing in the CARES Act on the federal level that talks about that specific situation.
Okay, and now let's go. This is another question from Kurt, circling back to Florida. Florida has a new unemployment insurance website. Do I need to start all over with an application on that new website to get in line for PUA?
I don't know the answer to that. And what I'm going to do, I think a number of my staff are watching, and I think one of them who went to the Florida site to figure things out this morning is probably watching. And if that's the case, I'm going to ask right now, let's try to figure out what if you have to reapply. I don't know the answer, but if we can find out here and they Slack me and tell me, I'll tell you right now. But for now, just assume I don't really know. You have to figure it out with them.
All right, this is from Tegan. Can you address the $2,500 W-2 wage threshold that makes 1099 independent contractors not eligible for PUA under the CARES Act?
No, I can't, because I'm trying to recall where the CARES Act specifically talks about that provision. And it's not coming to me. And so that means one of two things. One, I might have forgotten it, which is not an impossible situation. But two, that may be a state thing and not a CARES Act thing. I want to put a pin in that, because it sounds like you know exactly what you're talking about, but that isn't something that I've run into. Which absolutely doesn't mean it's not accurate. It means I haven't given it a thought.
Okay, this is one that's asking, how come some people have already received UI money and others haven't heard back anything? Is that just simply a factor of how overloaded the systems are?
Yeah, the only thing that all states have in common right now is that they're just slammed. They weren't staffed for this. And then of course you have to put on top of that all their current staff is probably home anyway, trying to figure this out from home. I can only speak to what I think happens in most of these offices. And that is, if everything is really clear cut, I work for IBM and they fire me and I apply for unemployment, I have my W-2s, I'm really eligible, everything's good, then it's easy. Then I'm going to get money faster than an independent contractor, because the state has never given money to independent contractors before, and now they're told they have to, and they have no system for that. They don't know how to check it. They don't know how to prove how much you made or anything else. And that's why some people are getting money more than others. Other than that, I would liken it to the Copyright Office. I have sent in copyright applications that are exactly the same on the same day, pretty much. And one gets back to me in 3 weeks and one takes 6 months. And I have no idea why.
Okay, this is the last one from last night from Gary. I have received the PPP loan. Is it fully forgivable if we use it for disbursements to my partner and me?
Okay, so there was Treasury guidance that came out last week regarding partnerships. And the first question is it a general partnership? If it is a general partnership, then yes, because you should have gotten the PPP loan in the name of your partnership. And if you got the PPP loan in the name of the business, then you can make disbursements based on your K-1s to you and your partners. What you can't do is then turn around as a partner and file for a PPP based on being self-employed. You only get one bite at the apple, and what Treasury said last week is that you have to file for the PPP in the name of the company. Now, is it forgivable if you pay disbursements? Remember, the way you would have calculated your net income for your partnership, and I forget which line it is on the K-1s, right? But the way you would have calculated that on your partnership return would be the equivalent of the disbursement that you made last year. So yes, that's how you use that money. Last caveat on that is that partnerships are a little bit of we think we have a pretty good idea of how they're treated in this whole system, but we're not entirely sure. I would double check with an accountant on that question. But I feel pretty confident in saying yes to your question.
And I assume this is applying to the PPP, but it's not clear from the question from Drew. I understand that they are only taking into consideration 2019 and 2020 tax returns. What if I had no payroll sizable draws?
Yeah. So remember, and I'm assuming that you're a sole proprietor and that you're calculating this based on net income or a single member LLC or something, right? If that's the case, they are requiring that you have your Schedule C, your 2019 Schedule C. Now, you may have heard, oh, you can also use 2020. No. If you were in business in 2019, you can't. If you're a newly opened business, after a certain date, which escapes me at the moment, if you're a newly opened business, you can use your payroll, your net income from January and February of this year, it's January 1 to February 29 of this year, as your basis. But for everyone else, it's the 2019 Schedule C. Now, remember, if you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't have a Schedule C, I have an S Corp or C Corp or some other situation, ignore what I'm saying. If you have an S Corp or C Corp, then you have to pay yourself a W-2 wage. And then we talked for a long time about the fact that the only thing you can include in your PPP calculation are your payroll taxable amounts.
Okay, this is from Linda. In Wisconsin, photography is a non-essential business, currently classified by the governor there, and media is classified as essential. Please classify editorial and advertorial work. I assume she's asking which buckets do you think they would fall into, and perhaps whether or not we could advocate for a change based on the way that they're structured currently.
Yeah, I have, after this, I have a call with a client, and the question is, look, we need to all get back to work. I'm not sure if I fall under the essential business rules or not. I'll go back to say a few things. One, remember, what is an essential business and what is not is done on a locality, county, city level. Here in Texas, my county has different rules for what's essential than the county that's 10 miles away from me. So it's very hard to say what is essential and what's not, because, like you said, the general photography may be considered non-essential in your area, but media is. And what about something that's in the middle, where you're not sure if it would fall under media, but you're also not, you're not doing a type of photography that is, definitely non-essential? I think that there's a few options here. One is that you read the policies and you make your very best efforts to decide internally. I can't decide for you. From a legal standpoint, I wouldn't decide for you. ASMP can't decide for you, but you bring up a good point, Tom, which is maybe this is something that we should think about in relation to advocacy, classifying whether photography, commercial photography, falls under, certain criteria or not. I think, just off the top of my head, that there are so many different rules. There are thousands of rules about this around the country right now, and they all might be slightly different. That's almost tilting at windmills. By the time we figure out what we would want to advocate for, it's already done, right? But it is something to think about. You always have to look at your local regulations.
And I will say that based on what I've seen and heard, particularly in the last 48 hours, it's very clear that the discretion about these situations is being pushed down to state governors and then to local authorities to make the determinations about what businesses are considered essential and when they're safe to reopen and under what circumstances. And I think this is an incredibly fluid area right now of everything that we're dealing with. So here's a question. There's a couple of questions that are, I would say they're not particularly pertaining to what we've just been talking about, but they certainly are relevant. And one may actually be better answered by other people who are on the call today. And that is, it's sort of about what would be a good marketing message that would be sensitive to send out to clients right now, and what would be a time frame that would be appropriate the question is, what would be a sensitive and appropriate marketing and messaging timeline?
I'll throw in 2 cents on that and say that, you know, I have thought about this, and Tom Kennedy and I have talked about this in relation to, you know, not only photographers, but businesses and organizations, and how do you deal with the issues that are going on? You know, I was working with a photography store the other day, and they're having some online events and trying to provide information and advice and education. And the question is, well, can you really sell things right now, right? Can you, you know, promote a product? And you think about it, you know, all of the camera manufacturers, all their sales reps, many of them have been furloughed or let go or fired, right? And so it's a weird domino effect, even up the chain and down the chain. My 2 cents on it is that you should be honest and open with your clients and say, look, you know, this is an incredibly tough time. One thing Tom and I have said, and Tom mentioned this, I think, in the very first town hall when we talked about something like this, is that if you approach your clients and you acknowledge that they're going through issues as well, and you offer ways to help them, that works in a lot of different levels, both business and personally, as things that can help build bridges and bonds between you and your clients. So when the world comes back together, you know, you have that there. Tom, do you?
No, I think that's totally it. I think that, you know, as I said in the first webinar, I think in my mind, the central thing is to realize that your clients are human beings, that they need help right now, just as you do, and to figure out together what are the pain points that are occurring for both of you at this moment that by working together you could possibly solve. And I think that, you know, that's one way perhaps to approach this. And I think it's as to Tom's point, I think it's to make clear that you value the relationship with them. And it's not just a transactional financial relationship, but it's a human to human relationship. And that has, you know, incredible significance, I think, particularly at this point in time when we're all looking to draw support from one another. So that's kind of the way I guess I would address it. Another question that I think, again, this could be crowdsourced by everybody who's on today: how to keep everyone safe as we slowly reopen studio spaces. Any recommendations for software that allows for virtual photo and video approval by clients? I think that's a great question. And I guess if people have thoughts about that, it would be great to put it in the chat box. I don't know if you've thought about that at all, Tom.
No, I just recall, I think the webinar on Wednesday was with Michael Shea, and I remember Michael Shea talking about very early on in the process that his client was watching through Zoom as he was in his studio shooting. And, you know, I think you have to kind of make technology work. That, you know, I don't have much beyond that, but Jonathan Atkin in chat mentions Photo Shelter. I did a great panel just literally the hour before this with Alan, founder of Photo Shelter. And I think that definitely check out what they have going on as well. They have a lot of great resources over there.
Okay, another question regarding the PPP. If I didn't make a profit in 2019, is it worth filing for PPP?
Well, now we have a direct answer to that question, and we didn't have it until last week. If you are a sole proprietor, and if you're a sole proprietor, if you're self-employed, if you file a Schedule C on your 1040 taxes, meaning you're not a corporation or you're not some other form, and you do not have a positive number on line 31, which is your net income, not only should you not file for PPP, you're not eligible for PPP. We didn't realize that that was the case until Treasury came out with guidance approximately a week ago that says it's line 31 of your Schedule C. And if line 31 is 0 or less than 0, you cannot apply for a PPP loan if you're sole proprietor.
Okay, and this one from Brad. If I am an owner of a company and we are an S Corp, could I apply for unemployment, but keep all my employees on the payroll to save money for the company, but keep from impacting them?
So earlier I answered a question that was similar to that, but if you are a sole proprietor, right? And I said you can't really do PPP and unemployment if you're sole proprietor. I do believe you can do PPP and a sole proprietor and an S corp based on the situation that you just described, which is you have other employees, you're using the PPP to maintain their salaries and the business running. But if you do that, there's not enough money to pay yourself. And so then you could file for unemployment, but you have to prove to the unemployment office that you're not getting money from your company or from the PPP. And I guess the question comes down to what requirements and what evidence is your unemployment office going to ask?
Okay, and I want to return again to the issue of safety in the workplace right now, because I think this is a really significant one, and Molly Peters raised this. I have direct knowledge, not my personal situation, of a photographer, single person LLC, who is still forcing their one employee, a studio manager, to come in and work during the pandemic because having her work from home doesn't work for him. There's no legitimate reason why she can't work from home and get the vast majority of her regular tasks done. She is incorrectly, and I'm assuming this is a California situation, paid as an independent contractor, even though she works full time. So she doesn't have the protection of an employee, being an employee. She is fearful about retribution, getting fired if she reports him or somehow enforces the need to work from home. His business is not deemed essential, so it shouldn't be open, but they continue to work out of his house. Does the employee have any recourse?
Yeah, the employee does. There are provisions in the CARES Act that we didn't get into. There are other situations that specifically address this. Almost all of those are at the state level. And frankly, I would look up, if I were Googling the answer to this, I would put in Texas employment lawyer, COVID-19, and then you will find lawyers out there who have blogs like I do at my site, where there will be an answer to that question and what is available in your state. There are going to be a lot of those where if you are fired in a retaliatory fashion for not putting yourself in an unsafe situation, that's not okay. There are options there. I don't know what those options are. Frankly, I don't even know what they are in Texas, but I do know that employment lawyers will have the info on that, and you should definitely Google that and you'll find good info.
Okay, this one from Christine in Connecticut. I have some reticence about applying for PPP because of the concern that I'll need to repay those funds at a point not of my choosing. Any advice?
Yeah, two things. One, if you follow the letter of the law, which is you only use the PPP money for the allowed expenses and you use it within 8 weeks of it hitting your account, and you are able to prove that, it's going to be really hard for them to say the loan's not forgiven. But let's assume, terrible situation, the loan is not forgiven at the end of 8 weeks. Then it changes to a loan with a 2-year term at a 1% interest rate. So the loan is about as good a loan as you can possibly get. The interest rate is about as good as you can find. So you have to make the business decision. If my bank doesn't forgive this, then am I comfortable taking on that debt? But I will say, if it turns out that banks are not willing to forgive most of these loans, there's going to be a lot of uproar. People who do the right thing and follow the instructions, if their bank turns around and then says, no, it's not forgiven, I think, you're going to hear us writing letters. You're going to hear a lot of calls for that practice to end. So.
Okay. And this is a question from Facebook from Chris Langer. How do you determine what day you officially became unemployed? Is it your last paid invoice, the day that you lost your job, or when the state closed down? And then the second part of the question is, can you apply for unemployment retroactively, even if you received a PPP loan, which I know we've been talking about?
Okay, so for the first part of the question, and I may pull something up here if I can quickly find it. The first part of the question is you're going to want to figure out what your state requires for this. And let me pull up one thing right here. And let's see here. I'm sorry, I think this is relevant enough that I can look it up for you quickly, and if I can't in a second, then I'll just move on. In Texas, it says the first state you worked and the last state you worked, and then there is information on what they consider the last state you worked. Your state is going to be the one that can tell you that, and I bet it's going to be front and center on your state's website. And remember, just type in your state and unemployment office and you'll find it, right? And that's going to determine, it's going to help you determine when your last date is. They will have dates of employment for salaried, people. They'll have it for people who aren't paid, in the same way. That's a non-traditional applicant, I think is what Texas called it, right? Check with your state for how to determine the last day. Now, read me the second half. I hadn't answered that, but
it was, can you apply for unemployment retroactively even if you have received a PPP loan? And I think this is sort of getting to what we talked about, where you have to pause unemployment.
Yeah, I think that and so the question to me is, can you get that extra $600 a week? You probably can get that retroactively on the weeks that you, except for the 8 weeks. So let's say you're out of work right now for 4 weeks. You get the PPP tomorrow. That ends. So now you have no more money. You file for unemployment. It may be that in your state, you're able to get retroactively the first 4 weeks before the PPP came in. I don't know. I think that's going to be determined by the states on that one.
Okay. Another question. If I use the PPP funds for paying my wife and I disbursements over the next 8 weeks, is the entire amount forgivable? They're partners in the business.
Well, if you're general partners and you pay out according to the same way you paid out in 2019, then that's your paycheck, right? Remember, the original calculation tells you to take your net income in a general partnership of the partnership, which is on a different line on a different form. But if you're in a partnership, you take that net income, which is the amount of money you made, and divided by 12 times 2.5. That is essentially the amount that was dispersed to you in 2019 on average every month. And so, yeah, if you pay yourself in the same way for those things in accordance with 2019, then you're good to go. And the math makes that kind of work out, right? It's not like you couldn't, if you didn't pay yourself in 2019, you're not going to have a PPP loan of any size. And so you can't kind of mess that part up. If you get the PPP loan and you've calculated everything correctly, and again, check with your bank, your lender, your CPA, whoever, then you shouldn't have a problem with that.
Okay, a second question and this really loops back to what we were talking about with regard to how the credit reports are utilized. What if we have a freeze on our credit reports? Should we lift those freezes now to allow the feds to have access to our credit? And this is because obviously this person was subject to the security breach and took that as a stance in relation to the security breach that we all were affected by.
This question came up in one of my earlier webinars, and I didn't, I gave an opinion, but I didn't answer it. My opinion was that because it's the government, it's not going to be affected by freeze in the same way. But this is going to be a good point where I'm going to ask my wonderful staff to figure that out. And I'm going to get back to you just like I'm getting back to the person about Florida right now. So let me tell you what's going on with Florida. And as a recap, the question was, should I reapply now that Florida's new thing is up? And Mike DeForest from News 6, and he's the, he got information from Paige Landrum, who's the press secretary of the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity. If you are self-employed, gig worker, or independent contractor, you do not need to reapply for federal benefits if you've already submitted a state application per the DEO. New applicants use the same website for state benefits. So there's your answer to that. You do not need to apply. That came from the press secretary at the Florida DEO, and I will get back to you in a moment if the U.S. government pulling your credit report for an SBA loan will negatively impact your credit. My gut says no, but we'll get an answer for you.
Okay, another one from Ed Caldwell. Can you address how those of us who have both some small amount of W-2 income, in my case, from part-time teaching, how does that affect the PUA?
So every state has a different calculation. And I think that very first link I went to, which had all 50 states, there was a column in there that talked about how much money you can earn before it starts negatively impacting your unemployment benefits. It's a bit of a sliding scale in every state. If you're bringing in, $100 a week on the side, that may not affect your unemployment benefits at all. It may affect it by 20%. If you're bringing in, $1,000 a month for something, then your unemployment benefits will be less. Those are based on formulas, and those formulas are developed by the states. That's why when we talked about what the minimum benefit levels and all this type of stuff was, we were looking at the average of the weekly benefit for each individual state. That's how those things are determined. So will it prevent you from getting that? No. That $600 though, I'm still unclear as to if that can be lowered if you have outside work. I think it may be, but I'm unclear on that. And that's not an answer I'm going to have for you today because I'm still investigating that.
Okay, this is from Tom McCorkle. I've applied for PPP and EIDL loans, but haven't received any money from either of them. Still waiting to hear whether or not I've been approved. Today I can start to collect unemployment in Maryland. What happens if I start collecting unemployment and then get approved for the PPP loan? I'd much rather have the loan, but I'm not counting on it.
Yeah. If you get approved for the PPP loan, you call up the Maryland office and you say, hey, this is what happened. I applied for unemployment, and how do you want me to deal with this? What you don't want to do, the only thing that you could do that would be bad is you just don't tell anyone anything, and then you keep taking money from the state and the PPP. They will get you if the state won't allow that. Some states will allow that. Like I said a minute ago, if you have an S Corp, you have other employees, you can use that PPP for things other than paying yourself. But if you're paying yourself twice between unemployment and the PPP or any other program, the state is going to have a problem with that. Not the government, not the federal government quite as much. This will be more something you'll hear from the state first about that. So my advice, if those come through, call them up and say, yes, these came through. What would you like me to do? There will be a procedure because there will be a million people who are running in the same thing you are.
Okay, this is from Ellen Wolf. Today, the New York State Unemployment sent me a questionnaire application for PUA. It asked if I was available to telecommute. I answered yes, and I got a denial of benefits. I am totally confused.
What they're saying, remember, one of those provisions in the federal program said that if you are able to work from home and be paid essentially what you were paid before, which means your business wasn't negatively affected by COVID, then you are not eligible for the program. So they asked you, are you eligible to telecommute? They didn't ask all the other things I just said, but that's what I think they were meaning. And so when you said yes to that, what they then assumed is that, oh, you already still have your job, we're good to go. And that's not what needed to be communicated on either side as a terribly written question, because it doesn't indicate that if you say yes, you're going to be denied. And so, can you telecommute? Well, if what that means is that you now are not getting a paycheck, but your boss is making you hop on the computer every day for a little bit, then no, you can't. You can't do your job the way you were doing it. So, yeah.
Okay, and this is, I have kind of two versions of this question, but well, let me ask the first one from Katie Barnkey. Do we reapply for EIDL or hope that our applications are still in the queue if we haven't heard anything?
If you have gotten a confirmation email, which should have come within 24 hours after you hit submit, you are in the queue. You should not worry. You are completely fine. Again, my personal experience, I have still not gotten any communication from the Small Business Administration since the day I hit submit, but they've already sent money. Money's in the account. And I said this, I think, in week 2. The first time you'll likely hear from them is when you get money.
Okay. And this is from Matthew. What if you have both W-2 income and a 1099 for New York State? What's my eligibility for both UI and PUA?
I'm sorry, Tom, repeat that.
What if you have both W-2 income and 1099 income for New York State? What's my eligibility for both UI and PUA?
So I think it depends on, and some states are going to split this up. The amount that you are eligible for losing because of your W-2 income might be coming through the basic state application, but your independent contractor 1099 income might be paid by the PUA type stuff. And I don't know how those are going to mesh together, but the way that I understand it is that both groups are going to be covered. And so it wouldn't make logical sense that if you had one foot in each side, you wouldn't be covered. As far as how that actually will fit together, I'm not really sure.
Okay. So here's a question from Jen Lowry Flynn from Facebook. What if you make more on unemployment than what I would be getting from PPP because I don't pay myself fully being self-employed?
Well, if you make more on unemployment, then that's your calculation. And you have to take care of your family and everything else. Realize that unemployment money is taxable, right? And it is a finite period. And if you were to take PPP money, it might all be forgiven at the end of 8 weeks. And then you could likely file for unemployment, given your whatever state you're in. So I guess my answer to that would be, if unemployment makes more financial sense, then by all means do that.
Okay, this is from Judith Thompson. How do I apply for FPUC?
So you don't really apply for FPUC. Remember FPUC, and I'm even trying to remember what all these are. FPUC is that program that gives you $600 per week, but you get that automatically if you file for PUA, or if you file through the regular state unemployment process. The FPUC program is what gives the $600 to the state to pay you through the regular process. So you don't have to file separately for those.
Okay, this is from David Wells. If my state accepts me for unemployment, do I worry about which program they put me under?
No. If you are getting, here are the keys. Here's what the CARES Act really did in a nutshell. It added 13 weeks of availability to what your state normally has. It added $600 a week on top of what your state pays until July 31. And it took away a couple little things like the 7-day waiting period and allowed independent contractors to file. If those things are happening, I don't think you should care one bit what acronym the program's under, right? Because you're getting the benefits of the law. For most people, if you're an independent contractor, sole proprietor, self-employed, the program you'll be under is PUA. For other people who had only W-2 income, you'll be under your state's normal program, but getting that FPUC $600 a week on top of it. And so you'd technically be under FPUC. Doesn't matter. If you're getting the benefits that you're supposed to be getting, then I would not worry about that.
Okay, and this is from William Pasolka. I am an adjunct photography professor in addition to freelance work. Freelance work has totally stopped, but I'm still teaching online. Can I apply for the $600 without applying for unemployment?
No, the $600 a week is a function of unemployment. And so it is not a standalone program. There is no federal place to go apply for that. And the federal government is paying the states, which is paying you in a roundabout way. So that is part and parcel of the unemployment system.
Okay, this is another, these two gentlemen have asked the same question essentially. If I get unemployment first and then I'm notified I got PPP, can I quit unemployment if PPP is better for me?
Absolutely, because I don't think there's one state in the country that's going to make you take money if you have money elsewhere. I'm not even worried about if they'll allow you to, which is likely no. But the broader answer is, can you quit unemployment? Yes. I wouldn't quit it entirely. I would say I'm receiving money and now I want to put this on pause or whatever the equivalent is in your state, because at the end of 8 weeks, when the PPP is forgiven, you may still be out of a job. And if so, then you already have been in line for unemployment.
Okay, this is from Megan Martin. I'm not getting unemployment benefits on my self-employment income, only on my W-2 job. Can I still apply for PPP and or EIDL for my business?
So I think the question there is splitting. If your state is saying that they'll only give you unemployment for, they'll only give you benefits for the W-2. See, this is a little odd, right? Because the PUA is specifically designed for people who are not eligible for state unemployment. And the problem here is that W-2 people are eligible, so they wouldn't apply under the PUA. But independent contractors are not eligible for state, and so they would apply under the PUA. And so what happens when you have both? And I'm seeing here in chat that some states are saying they'll only consider your W-2 and not your 1099. Well, frankly, I would look at which number's higher. And if it's higher to say you're an independent contractor and then get PUA stuff, by all means, do that, right? Remember, both groups, no matter which side you're on, can get that extra $600 a week. Now, your question seemed a little broader, and it seemed to be, should I or can I apply for the PPP based on my 1099 income while still having the unemployment based on the W-2 income? And that now is at a specificity level that I can't get into. I really don't know. I really don't know. There's nothing that would seem to prohibit it, except that if someone looked at that, it would probably look like it was incorrect. You would want to check with your bank and your lender and a couple other things. I haven't heard anything about that specifically, but it feels a little weird, even if it might be technically possible.
All right, from Tracy Boulian, if we go on unemployment, but get a small job or a license fee income from a stock image, do we have to go off unemployment?
No. So two things interesting about this, and I'm going to answer a question you didn't ask here in a second. But most states have specific guidance on if you have a certain amount of income, how that affects your benefits, and it can also be periodic income. I'm not entirely, I would find out with my state on that. But one question I got yesterday, and I thought it was a really good one, and that is, what if you have done a job before the pandemic, but you get paid right now, and do you have to report that to unemployment as income you made right now? This is a really interesting question. And my answer was this. there are different methods of accounting, right? And this also applies to the PPP calculations. What if you did a lot of shoots in 19, but all of a sudden you didn't get paid for them until 20, right? And so does that mean you had zero income in 19? So my thought on this is you should first talk to your unemployment office about that for sure. But on the PPP side in the calculation, there are two types of accounting methods. There's the cash accounting method, which most small sole proprietors use, which is you say you earned money when you receive it. But there's also this accrual accounting method that most other businesses use. You say you earned money, you collect that money when you do the work, not when the check comes in. So what I recommended is they speak to an accountant, because if that is the case and you can increase your PPP amount by switching entirely over to an accrual accounting system where you have earned the money when you did the job, then that would increase your income. That's all about a accounting method, and you definitely need to talk to an accountant about that.
Okay.
So I know I went on a little tangent, but I hope I answered that.
Okay, this is from Carol Liskovitz, and I think she's just basically wanting to confirm this. The PPP calculation of line 31 on a Schedule C divided by 12 and multiplied by 2.5, that equals the total amount of the PPP benefit for the 8 weeks, correct?
That is correct. Now, the only one caveat is that if you've already received an EIDL loan, then you have to add in the EIDL loan to whatever that PPP number is, and then you subtract out your net income or the EIDL advance, and that gives you your final amount of the PPP loan. But for most of us, and I think I've hardly heard of anyone who has received an EIDL loan, then yes, you are absolutely correct. You apply for that, your net income line 31 divided by 12 times 2.5, that's your PPP amount, and then the EIDL stuff if you have any part of it. Now,
Okay.
let me, Tom, let me jump in and say, my staff here is telling me that I was incorrect, and this happens occasionally, and that the pull from the SBA is a hard pull on your credit report. People are reporting a 1 to 5 point drop because of that pull, so that is something to be aware of. It is not exempt from that, and because of that, that makes me think if you have a credit freeze, you should contact your credit bureau and find out for sure if they'll let that through. I would be more concerned about that now than I was 20 minutes ago, but also realize that so far, and this is not a guarantee, so far the only reports that I've seen for EIDL credit pulls have been through Experian, not through TransUnion or Equifax. And so maybe you just unfreeze that, maybe you unfreeze all three. I definitely can't answer that for you, but it sounds like it is considered a hard pull in the same way that any other credit pull is, which is a little surprising to me, but also there you go.
Okay, from Ed Caldwell, what about the weeks before you get your PPP? Can you get the retroactive PUA, FPUC up to the day you successfully get the PPP?
Well, yes, because you don't know if you're going to get the PPP at all. And so remember, the PPP is used for the 8 weeks following when you get it. There's an interesting kind of conversation that we could have about, can you get all the PPP money and then back pay for what you would have been, not maybe is the answer to that, but part of the PPP promise you make is that if you fired anyone, you have to rehire them. Again, in the context of the sole proprietor, if you filed for unemployment, then you have to kind of rehire yourself. And can you get unemployment though up until you get PPP? Yeah, I haven't seen anything that says otherwise.
Okay, and then a couple of people have asked, Tom, if someone on your staff could pop in the URL to the Department of Labor spreadsheet that you had for all the 50 states.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and then this from Brian Dressler. Will EIDL be considered taxable income or not?
So, no is for EIDL. I'm about 75% sure that the answer is no. For PPP, I am 100% sure that the answer is no. I will see if I can get the other 25% assured in my mind, but it is pretty clear that these loans are not considered taxable income at all, and I would feel pretty confident in saying that for both of them.
Okay, and this is from William Morton. You mentioned applying first for PPP, then unemployment after PPP runs out after the 8 weeks. Chase notified me today to reapply for PPP this morning, which I did. Then today, Texas notified me that I am getting the PUA. Should I cancel the PPP application?
So my question would be, when Chase said reapply, were they saying reapply because they were they saying reapply because you had already made an application and there was a problem with it, or were they saying we are now opening applications again, you can now apply? Almost it doesn't matter to me until the moment they say that you're approved. Until the moment that they say that you're approved, you can collect those unemployment benefits. But the minute you're approved, I would start calling the Texas Workforce Commission and asking what you do in that situation. And I want to follow up with a point that I just saw in chat, and that's yes. Remember, like we talked about at the beginning, the EIDL applications are not open right now. It still says when you go to the EIDL site, the lapse in appropriations, and it doesn't give you a link to apply for anything. That's accurate. The president signed that into law at 1:20 or something today, and we don't know when the SBA will open up applications again. I promise that when that happens, I will send a message so that ASMP is tweeting that information out and my website is talking about it. But right now, as of this moment, and of course I haven't personally checked since I've been talking here, but they're not open. It could be tomorrow, it could be tonight, it could be, Wednesday. I have no idea.
Okay. I know this is from Rubina Jenkins. I know it might be a state issue, but I'm sure there is a general rule about underemployment, since I think that is the situation most photographers will find themselves in. For instance, if you normally have $10,000 worth of revenue a month, but right now it's $5,000 a month, most state unemployment offices don't seem to be set up to handle this kind of a scenario. I'm thankfully not down to zero revenue, but I'm probably at 30% normal. Will these new unemployment systems allow for making up some of that ground?
Yes, so you're exactly right. Most states do not have an option for underemployment as a category, right? Where you've lost some work, but not, all your work kind of thing. The PUA specifically talks about people who are partially employed. And this could go for people who have been furloughed, and it could go for people who have lost a certain percentage of their income. And so the new unemployment provisions and programs in the CARES Act are allowing for people who are underemployed to receive benefits, even if the state that they are in did not allow that prior to this.
Okay, question from Tegan Keller. Can you give clarity on the fact that if you had at least $2,500 worth of W-2 wages for 2019, all of your 1099 and other business income is negated when applying for PUA, and it forces you to apply for regular unemployment, which then only looks at the W-2 wages as the basis for the amount being given back?
So I was looking in chat and I was seeing some of these comments. And so I think what this is asking, is that in the state that Tegan is in, if you have more than a certain amount of wages, then you have to apply in one line or the other. That seems to be at odds with the policy intent of the law. So what we normally see happen there is that someone changes. And what I mean by that is the Department of Labor may put out a notice next week that says, hey, states, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to force someone to only use W-2 and not 1099 because the purpose of this law was to do that. If that guidance comes out, then you would be retroactively eligible for the 1099 income, right? Now, the other thing that could happen is the state could figure it out on its own and make the adjustments. And then the third thing that can happen is no one does anything, and that's the way it is in the state that you're in. That seems like a terribly unfair option. And if it turns out that that's what's happening in many states, I think everyone should let us know. I think it would be a good effort on the part of ASMP to reach out to the state departments of labor and the federal Department of Labor and say, look, you specifically set up this program to help people who were independent contractors who had 1099 work. And here you have a state saying, we're not going to help you if you make more than $2,500 on W-2 income. That's not all right. And so we would make some noise about that. But that sounds like one of the things that the Department of Labor may put out some more guidance on soon. And if that's the case, then you would probably be retroactively eligible, even if you're not right now.
Okay, and this is, I mean, this is probably a hard one to answer, but it gets to Mike Clipper's earlier point about the new guidance that's being offered today and the intent of the new amounts of money that were going for small businesses to be funneled through banks that, you know, will really be much more accustomed to dealing with sole proprietors. But based on what you're hearing, Tom, do you have any recommendations right now about banks that are being more friendly to sole proprietors in the PPP program?
Yeah. You know, when we first started looking at the program, I had a feeling that smaller banks, community banks would be, you know, better able to do this than the large banks. I think that was borne out, but the problem was that the large banks sent huge sums of money to big clients, right? And because of that, the money ran out very quickly. So in the most recent allocation, I think there was a provision that said $60 billion is allocated to community banks. And the law, I am positive, defines that. I will tell you the law that was signed by the president today, I have not read, unlike the original CARES Act. And so I'm not entirely sure how community banks are defined. But I would say that the best bet right now is to probably the mid-sized banks, if you have a pre-existing banking relationship, are going to be a good place to go. If you don't have a pre-existing banking relationship, there are a number of lenders now that have signed up for this program in the last few weeks that aren't even banks. They're just lenders. And they're allowing you to apply. I've heard very good things, oddly enough, about organizations like PayPal. PayPal is, if you have a business PayPal account in any way, they're offering PPP applications, and they're not a bank in the sense of a bank, right? There are a number of online places that are doing this. Now, you want to make sure these places are reputable, right? How do you find out if someone is legitimate? You go to the treasury.gov site, and on there you'll see a link to list of eligible lenders. That's where you would find these lenders and the banks that are near you. Always, I start with the bank you bank with. Start there. And then if for whatever reason they're not accepting applications or anything else, then spread your search out a little bit more. I will tell you personally that I think one of the things that's come out of this for me and my business is that I will probably start a banking relationship with one of the banks that is smaller and may have someone I can call.
Okay, this is from several people that are saying that they applied for EIDL, but then did not get a confirmation email like you described. So does that mean they should reapply, assuming that the first thing did not go through?
Yeah, that's a tough question, and my answer to that is no, don't reapply, but do call, okay? Now, I will tell you a little tip. Again, I mentioned this last week. Remember, SBA is staying open. Their phones are staying open on weekends, one. Two, there are SBA offices in every major city. One of my interns reached out to SBA Dallas the other day, and I think they got back to us in 2 or 3 days. But then once we had them going back and forth on emails, they answered as many questions as we sent. We went back and forth a number of times. I did not ask if they have access to be able to look up things like that. They may or may not. But the bottom line is maybe you could ask them that question. And if someone at SBA, even if it's SBA Dallas, SBA whatever, tells you, you know, to do this or that, I would definitely listen to them. So, and as a point of reference, I forget, honestly, it was long enough ago, there's a page in the application, and at some point it takes you to a website, and it may be right after you hit submit, and it says something like application submitted, your confirmation number is XYZ. If you didn't get that page, I do think it's worth a call to the SBA. I wouldn't, you know, overly worry because, you know that you submitted the thing. I would have the information. I would say, I submitted this at approximately 10 a.m. on this day. And I heard that people were supposed to get a confirmation email and did not. Remember also, millions upon millions of people were trying that at the same time you were. And maybe just some of the vagaries of the internet, it didn't get through to you in some form or fashion. I wouldn't worry too much, but I would call.
We have about, I would guess, Tom, we've probably got about 40 questions left at this point. So it's not surprising that, you know, people have got a lot to talk about. How do we want to handle this? I know, I mean, obviously I'm not trying to cut anybody off, and we're trying to do our best to ensure that people get answers to the questions that they're raising. I just am trying to do it for a time check purpose, and also because I know that we haven't even touched on the work that you and I have been doing, and Mike has been doing on advocacy, on you know, on some other issues like the CASE Act, as well as talking about the situation with Stephanie Sinclair and Instagram. So, and I know that that's been on people's minds as well.
Well, here's what I'd like to do. We have the list of questions. If you have other questions, be sure to get them in the Q&A. And we have access to that Q&A, I'm pretty sure, Stretch and Doug. We have access to that Q&A after the fact. So we can look at what questions we might not have answered. Let's do 2 more right now, because I do want to, I have a call with that client I was mentioning where I have to figure out if it's an essential or non-essential business in about 25 minutes. So let's do 2 more questions, and then let's spend a little bit of time at the end talking about some of the other projects we're working on. And we will do our very best to get answers to the questions that you have, either in articles that we have already written or will write, or at the very outset, the next town hall. We know that these things are time sensitive, and I wish I could answer everything at once. And I will tell you, we have 40 questions here. I think that in the last 4 weeks, we've probably had close to 1,000 questions sent to our offices to answer. And obviously we can't answer everyone, and we really wish we could, but hopefully you're getting good information. So let's do a couple more here, and then we'll talk about a few things and call the day for today.
Okay, this is from Albert Young. I own a wedding photography LLC as a sole proprietor, and also a commercial photography LLC as a partnership. Would I be able to apply for 2 separate PPPs? And there is a question on the application implying that if you are expecting another PPP loan apart from the loan I am applying for, then I may be not eligible.
So that question on there talks about, that question on there specifically is talking about 2 PPP loans for the same business. You can get on as many waiting lists and things as you like, but you should only accept 1 PPP loan per business. There may be guidance out on that specifically now, but I did look that up a few weeks ago, and I seem to recall that when you are asked to fill out an application, it specifically asks you, do any of the owners of this business own any other businesses? And you have to say yes or no. And if you say yes, you have to list that business. I am fairly sure you can apply for a PPP for both. Imagine you own 2 different businesses that each employ 10 people. It within the policy intent of the law wouldn't make sense to exclude one for the other because they're separate business entities. So I, though, am unclear about how that would work if it's only you as a sole proprietor in both. But again, that would be fixed by the net income side of things, right? Because each business would have its own net income number, which is how you determine the PPP number.
Okay.
That's my best advice on that.
Okay, and this is from Molly Peters. Regarding the $1,200 one-time payment from the IRS, I followed 2018 taxes electronically, and the IRS should have my bank account information on file. I have not yet filed the 2019 taxes. Based on all the information I can find, I qualify for the full $1,200 amount. However, when I try to track it on the IRS website, they say they can't track my payment in a generic message. What can I do?
Yeah, so everything we've been talking about, the only thing we haven't talked about today is the federal personal stimulus, which is that $1,200 check, okay? And many people started getting those last week. And then many people started clicking on the button that says, get my payment at the IRS site to figure out the status of the payment. And most of those people got an error message that says, we can't determine if you're eligible for this. My understanding is that error message was given to people no matter which, if they were ineligible, but also given to people who they couldn't find, or given in all these situations, which may or may not include you. And so I don't know the answer to that specifically, except to say, get to that IRS webpage. And when you track your payment, it's going to say it doesn't know if you're eligible for this. You may have to get on the phone on that, which, as Tom and I can attest on a totally different matter, is a bear with the IRS at the best of times, and let alone now. Okay, wait. So let's see here. We have some things in the notes. I was getting that IRS error message, just tried the site again, and now it says I'm eligible to enter my bank info. I think Michael Hart said, see my text. I don't know who he texted, but it might be you or me, Tom. I don't know. Or maybe it's above there and I just missed it. Oh yeah, okay, it's up there. Just keep logging in. So it sounds like they might have tried fixing it today. But for most people, if it wasn't working last week, I would just keep trying.
Okay, one final question, Tom. Sarah Goodfriend, similar to the question from Connecticut earlier, should I apply for PPP if I am a sole proprietor, made a profit in 2019, but I don't have expenses such as a mortgage or business rent or employees besides myself? Does just paying myself count as a forgivable expense, and how do I prove that?
Yes, it does. I'm sorry, let me go in order. Yes, you should apply. Yes, it does count as a forgivable expense as long as it's within the, as long as you use 75% of the money to pay your employees, which in this case is based on you and your net income in 2019. And the other 25% of it, remember I said at least 75% has to be spent on that. You can spend the rest of this money however you want to spend it. It doesn't have to be in those 5 categories. It's only those 5 categories that are forgivable. So let's say that you get a PPP loan in for $10,000 and you spend $7,500 of it to pay your employees and or yourself. And then the other $2,500 you pay for something that's not on that list. You need a new something or other, or you're paying off debt that isn't approved, or you're buying a camera or something. At that point, you would provide all that information to your bank, and the bank would say, okay, you owe us back $2,500 at a 1% interest rate, and the loan term is 2 years. Just because it doesn't fall in those categories doesn't mean you can't pay for that if you need to. It's for business expenses. It just means that it's only forgivable if it falls into those categories.
Okay, so Tom, do you want to talk a little bit about what you've been up to with regard to the situation with Stephanie Sinclair and Instagram?
Yeah, absolutely. So many of y'all are familiar with the case that came out of the Southern District of New York last week, which talks about Stephanie Sinclair. And why don't I actually, if you don't mind, Tom, I'll take 5 minutes and run through something real fast.
Absolutely, go ahead.
This. Okay, and thanks for sticking with us. This might be the first time I'm going to talk about something non-stimulus related since we started this thing. So. All right, can everyone see that? Looking good? I'm gonna assume yes, okay. Get through all our states here. So there's a photojournalist, Stephanie Sinclair. She put images on her public, personal Instagram feed. So you could go see that feed. She was then approached by online publication Mashable, who said, we want to use one of your images and we want to pay you $50 for it. The photographer said, no, I'm not going to do that. You don't get to license my image for $50. Mashable then embedded that image in that article using Instagram's API. She sued Mashable and said, hey, that's copyright infringement. What happened here, the upshot of the case, is that the judge said, no, it's not. And the judge said that when you have a public account on Instagram, then you have agreed to the terms of service of Instagram that allow that to be embedded using Instagram's API by a third party. Now, the third parties can include anyone who's personal and non-commercial. It can also include broadcasters and publishers, okay? And Mashable, as an online publication, fell under the publisher requirement, or the publisher prong of that test. And so therefore, what we had is her case was dismissed before trial for not being copyright infringement, given the facts I just gave you. The technical language in there said that when you sign up for Instagram and you have a public profile, you're granting Instagram a sub-license to reproduce and display the images. And then, if on the other hand, if you're a third party, you agree to Instagram's platform policy, which says you can access through the API, you can embed Instagram images, and that is a sub-license from Instagram to that user. As long as you abide by the platform policy, then that is an acceptable use. That's what the judge understood this to be. So the question is, what do we do now? And so the important things is that the profile is public, embedding an image is a valid exercise of the Instagram API, and Mashable had a valid sublicense to display the work. So here's what the court said. Thus, because the plaintiff uploaded the photograph to Instagram and designated it as public, she agreed to allow Mashable as Instagram sub-licensee to embed the photograph in its website. This is after she told Mashable, no, you cannot use it for $50. Simply by virtue of it being in a public account, they were allowed to do this. So here's some quick FAQs, and then I'm going to wrap this side up of it. Does this mean that anyone can take any work that's on Instagram? No. This is only based on situations when the person who is using the photo is using the Instagram embed feature using the Instagram API. If someone steals a photo off your Instagram or screenshots it or anything and puts it on their website, that's still copyright infringement. This one judge held is not copyright infringement because of the terms of use of Instagram. And so can any commercial company use the embed feature? Here I said unclear, but likely no. There are lots of different policies. We have the terms of use policy, we have the platform policy, we have the acceptable use policy and the privacy policy, and they're all intertwined, right? If you agree to the terms of use, you're kind of agreeing to this policy over here, and it's very, very confusing. So individuals who are using the features non-commercially can always embed. Publications and broadcasters also can embed, because Mashable had ads on the site, and so we might consider it commercial, but they're a publisher. A purely commercial company using it for purely commercial reasons are supposed to get permission from the user before they embed, but there's nothing technically that prevents them from doing it. This is what we asked Instagram. I wrote a letter to Instagram on behalf of not only ASMP, but 6 other visual organizations, which I'll talk about in a second, and said, look, Instagram, you need to allow users to restrict embedding on a per image basis or a per account basis. And the question is there a precedent for that? Is that a hard thing to do? Well, YouTube does that. If you have a YouTube account, you can designate your videos as not being allowed to be embedded. There's no reason Instagram can't. And I sent a letter to Adam Mosseri and Mark Zuckerberg, the CEOs of Instagram and Facebook, and said, hey, this is one of the things we really need you to do. There are a couple other things in there. You can read that letter on ASMP's website. 2 more questions. I've been talking about personal accounts. Can a business or a creator Instagram type account be set to private? No. This means if you want to make your account private, you have to downgrade from your business account, which means you lose your analytics, you lose your monetization. It is a bad deal. This is another thing we talked with Instagram about. You shouldn't be forced to choose between promoting your business and having your work used in ways you don't want it. That's not okay. And then, does this mean I can't sue someone in my state? No. This was one ruling by one judge at the district court level in New York. Now, could here in Texas or out in California or somewhere else, could the ruling have come out differently? Yes, it could. If that's the case, other courts are going to take it up. But realize that this is just in the Southern District of New York, and in New York in general, this is now the rule. Okay. Okay, so we made these graphics, and the groups I was talking about. So ASMP wrote this letter on behalf of 6 organizations: the National Press Photographers Association, Professional Photographers of America, Graphic Artists Guild, APA, and NAMPA, North American Nature Photographers Association. We said, look, you can't do this thing. Now, notice that these 2 graphics, which are on the ASMP website, are graphics you can put up on Instagram right now. You can say, hey, I've made my account private in order to prevent embedding after this ruling. We asked Instagram to allow us to restrict embedding. This is a public profile. But what if you don't want to set your account to private because you have a business account or you want to keep your portfolio out there? Well, one thing that's not in here that I want to mention is archiving images. You can archive certain images one at a time so that they don't show on your public feed, but also you haven't downgraded your account. The thing to remember is anything on your public feed is available to be embedded according to Instagram's platform policy. All right, that's what I had about that. And there's going to be a lot more coming up about that pretty soon.
Mike, if you're still with us, I'd like to have you talk a little bit about what you think the next steps are going to be with regard to our advocacy moves and what we're trying to get accomplished, because it's very clear to me that even though there's been a new tranche of money made available through the bill that was signed by the president today, there's still a lot of details that need to be sorted through, and there's a lot of activity that needs to be monitored. But in addition to that, we are still very much trying hard to get the CASE Act passed. And I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about where those negotiations stand and how people can help who are on the call today in terms of trying to persuade Senator Ron Wyden to lift his hold. And why this is significant is, unfortunately, the rules of the road are that only one senator can block a bill from going forward by putting a hold on it. And Senator Wyden has had a hold on the CASE Act since last September. And we have been working assiduously for the past few months to try to get him to lift his hold by engaging in good faith negotiations on this. And Mike has been part of a small working group of lawyers representing the visual organizations who have been central to that negotiation and discussion. So Mike, I think it's in the face of the pandemic and what that has done to our industry, I think it's all the more outrageous that this is still continuing to be the situation. And I thought you could talk a little bit about how people on the call today can help with that particular problem.
Yeah, Tom has described the situation correctly. The negotiations are going on between the office of two of our sponsors, Senator Durbin of Illinois and our prime sponsor, Senator Kennedy of Louisiana, and they have been going on for several months. We had our latest exchange of ideas or negotiating items this week. We're waiting to hear, that went out this morning from us back to them. The fear is we don't know if, we are going to have a window to make this happen in the absence of Wyden folding up his tent and taking off his hold. As long as Wyden has a hold on the bill, Majority Leader McConnell, who is always loath to go on the floor with a bill where he has opposition, he's very careful on floor time, as we call it. He is especially sensitive to that in this area, in this era, given the virus situation. So what we're hoping to do is have a breakthrough with the Wyden folks and get an agreement so that it will be comfortable for Mr. McConnell to take the bill up. Absent that, this could go down to the wire later in the year as we continue to keep the pressure on and we try to find a window for the bill. The best thing that all of you can do on this bill is write, and Tom, we talked about this the other day, we will post, I don't know if we got a chance to do it this week, but we will post a list of senators. We're only worried about the Senate now, your two senators, not the House. We will post a list of the current members of the United States Senate who are not, that's a not, co-sponsors of the bill. The more co-sponsors we get, the more likely we can push McConnell once hopefully the virus situation calms down a bit generally and on the Hill to take, to really push back about Wyden to take up the bill. So what I would like is for everyone on the call to see if their member is not a co-sponsor. The number's around 18 or 20 now who are, Tom, as I recall. I have to go look. That's correct, yeah. And I would like them to go to the website. Tom, you and I will talk, but we'll get it up first thing next week, I guess. We'll put up the list and we'll put up, a letter or that we have sent or something, or a draft letter that you guys can crib from. And the message be to your member how important this bill is and how the importance of the bill has only been underscored by the current virus situation and the dramatic financial impact of ASMP members and others similarly situated. That's what I would recommend at this point while we continue the negotiation. I will address very briefly the next round is follow up what I said earlier. We are going to use the window. Tom and I are going to get together first thing next week, review this call, review the legislation, and Tom and I have a chance to look at it in detail. I've only read summaries because it just got signed. And what I'd like to do is see if we can come up with a short list of 2 or 3 points we talk about, the micro business eligibility issue, and maybe how to pursue governors to do what New York did. And we are starting to talk with other members of the copyright community who are working with us on the CASE Act, who are small like we are, songwriters, authors, etc., graphic artists, the type of groups that Tom Madry mentioned who signed on to the Sinclair letter. And what we're going to do is also reach out to groups like the National Federation of Independent Businesses and like groups, and find groups that would be supportive of, assuming we get the next bill, of going forward with us and pushing for this type of legislation. We're too small to get it done ourselves, and we really need to go out and make an effort. And one of the things that Tom Kennedy and I are going to do next week as part of that overall product, we're going to be reaching out to a couple of key senators in Maryland and perhaps beyond, and see if we can find a horse or someone to shepherd this amendment through. And we're working on that, and we will get back to you on that. But right now, our focus is breaking the logjam on the CASE Act and making sure if there is another round of legislation, which I expect there will be, but the numbers may not be as high as we've seen in the past, and that we can we want to make sure those two go, the CASE Act and the type of changes to this current system on the stimulus packages will be ours. And you can help on the CASE Act by writing. Tom, I don't know if you want to mention, you've written so many letters in the last few days. You've inundated the Hill on the stimulus, making those points.
Yeah, we have done that, and we will continue to do that. And I've also written to the governors, making it clear that the ASMP stands very strongly in support of their efforts to, or at least the governors that are the leaders of the Governor's Council, which is our governor from Maryland.
Hogan is the National Conference of
Governors. Yeah, National Conference of Governors. Governor Hogan of Maryland and Governor Cuomo of New York are the co-chairs of that group. And I've written to both of them several letters supporting them in terms of what they're doing to try to combat the pandemic and supporting their calls for nationwide testing and contact tracing to be made available so everybody can get back to business. And so these are just, this is a kind of a broad sweep of the type of activity that we've all been involved with.
Yeah, I think that the next evolutionary part of this whole stimulus package, Tom, just to go to that, is the recognition that the backlash is continuing to get worse with the big companies taking money. There's a story that just broke in the Washington Post, Tom, that's amazing. AutoNation, one of the largest auto sellers in the country, accepted $95 million in loans and is yet to agree to pay the money back. And they did it by going agency by agency and qualifying for the 500 employees per location, despite the fact that they really didn't need it. And the story quotes some unnamed employees there or officials saying how disgusting it was. Those type of stories, if they keep coming out, are going to help us anecdotally in getting a micro business category, which I think if there is a new bill, I think it's doable.
Yeah, that's what we're going to be pushing for sure.
Yeah, and next week is the big, I don't want to belabor it, but next week is a big week to get that going because they're out next week. And one of the things that Tom and I are going to do is start reaching out to several of our colleagues, particularly in the creative community, who have similar problems to you all, and get that going. Anything else you want, Tom, or is that?
No, I think that's great, Mike. The one thing I would say, and this is this is a kind of a final point to put a cap on, today's town hall. I want to address it a couple of different ways. Number one, we're doing this work not only on behalf of our members, but also on behalf of the entire photographic community. And as such, I think this is a unique perspective. In the questions we got last night, a person asked, what would I gain from becoming a member of ASMP? And I hope that question, the answer to that question has been amply in evidence this afternoon. We are working as hard as we possibly can to ensure that the profession of professional photography gets through this crisis as best as possible, knowing that the impacts are severe and knowing that there are going to be casualties in this war against the pandemic. But we have to keep trying and we have to keep working, and that's exactly what we're doing. At the same time, as I think I alluded to, but maybe didn't mention explicitly, one of the real pain points for me personally on this situation is the fact that organizations like ours were deliberately excluded from the rounds of stimulus money that's been made available so far. So we aren't able as an organization to take advantage of the opportunities that all of you have as individuals to take advantage of. So I need help and I need your support for us. We not only are doing the advocacy work that Mike and I have referenced today, but we're obviously doing the work that Tom's been so instrumental in with his staff of providing the answers to all of you so you can get the aid that's so necessary to your own businesses. In addition to that, as I hope was manifest today, we have people through, our members have been reaching out to people across the photographic industry and offering support and, collegiality and talking and getting together. And, the ability to come together as a community is very much also what we offer as an organization. And I think the three pillars of advocacy, of legal support for your businesses, and of the ability to have a community of members who have each other's backs and are willing to share and are willing to engage with each other deeply to try to get through this. All those things, I think, make us worthy of support. And even if people are not able to pay their dues right now, or are not, for whatever reason, not seeing how they can find a way to join, even a tiny donation, a micro donation, would be helpful at this point in time, so we can keep the doors open, the lights on, and keep going to do the things that I think we've done this afternoon. So Tom, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I want to have 30 seconds, if that's okay, Tom.
Sure, Mike.
You all don't know me, but I have spent 45 years in this town, 10 of those working in-house for trade associations and many more representing a variety of trade associations in legal capacity. This is an extraordinary time. And in all the years I've worked with trade associations, both the biggest and the very small ones like ASMP, I've never seen a crisis taken on the way Tom and Tom have. They are providing extraordinary work under very limited circumstances. You know, a lot of the people I work for and a lot of people I've represented weren't, had multiple people and voices and hired outside groups. That is not the case with ASMP. And I think they deserve a special nod, and I think you should take with great seriousness Tom Kennedy's, asking you to help out if you can, if you haven't already. This is a critical time, and I've never been more impressed and more proud of the people I've worked with. That's all, Tom.
Thank you, Mike. Tom,
yeah.
I'll leave it to you to wrap up for us today.
Yeah, I will, and thank you, Mike, for saying that and giving your experience and your history. That's very meaningful. Tom and I are approaching this really just like every one of you, one day at a time, right? And we'll get on the phone on Mondays and everything. The whole world has changed from 24 hours before. And I said this a few town halls ago, but I think really it is the ethos of ASMP right now that everyone in the industry, in the profession, is our member. And now that is our philosophy. Now we want to make that a reality, right? Your support does help, but even more important than that, if we can go on the Hill, if we can say, we have this number of people who are standing with us, and we represent these huge numbers of members, that strengthens our position and it helps us when we're trying to get things accomplished for you. So I'm really proud to be part of this organization right now. I'm really happy everyone came to the town hall. And thank you, Tom and Mike and everyone. And we'll wrap it up today, but we're going to be back next week with brand new stuff and new articles and new webinars. And I'll be here on Friday again, and we'll see if we can break some records and talk for more.
All righty. Well, thank you all very much for attending today. Just to put one final plug in, we will be doing this again, as my friend says, we'll be doing this all over again next Friday with another town hall, but also next Wednesday, we're doing a series of Wednesday webinars where we bring on special guests to basically talk about business, legal, and creative issues that we think are beneficial to you as you work through the costs of the pandemic and what you want to see for yourself as business owners on the other side. And this coming week, we will have on Cameron Sterling, who will be talking about tooling up your website to make it a really great marketing vehicle for you. So I would encourage you, if you have the opportunity, both the webinars on Wednesday and the webinars on Friday or 3 p.m. Eastern, to please join us. We'll be, we have information about both on the site that allow you to get in and register. But please continue to be with us on this. We can't do this alone, and we can't do it without your participation and your presence and your letting us know what and how we can be helpful to you, what we can do and how we can be helpful. So I look forward to seeing you all. Stay strong, stay safe, and know that we'll get through this together. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.